So what's the state of agentic AI at Picnic?
Beside the tracking of productivity and progress on one hand, we have set up a very systematic tracking of bottlenecks. I think the worst what can happen for us as an industry is that you're starting to automate processes that shouldn't exist at all. Quality-related aspects, but also security, resilience, etc. That type of engineering will become even more important going forward.
Yeah. You have actual org charts where agents are some of the nodes.
That is the way how we think about organization.
Okay. Hi, welcome to the Signal podcast. I'm your host, Werner Heijstek. This is your monthly podcast where we turn IT complexity into business clarity. And I'm today joined by Daniel Gebler, the CTO of Picnic. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just start out. So last year you were keynote speaker at the Signal event that we organized. And back there you said that Picnic is primarily a tech company that operates as a food logistics supply chain. Mm-hmm. Is that still the case?
Well, it was certainly the case last year, and to be honest, it is even more the case now. So we have started obviously with a retail proposition. So online supermarket, lowest price, free delivery, all the food that you like, you can get through Picnic. But behind the scenes, we have building a lot of technology. Initially, the consumer proposition, basically the app and everything around it. But over time, we just realized that what makes really Picnic unique is the way how we organize our supply chain. And more recently, we have built automated warehouses. We have now built 3 automated warehouses where we have a lot of robots that working basically together with humans, which are controlled by an agentic control system. So there's a lot of stuff that is essentially only possible because we are a tech company.
So AI has become quite the conversation in the past couple of years, but my suspicion is that as a company, you were already busy with machine learning, for example. How has that evolved?
So Picnic started in 2015. And at that time, obviously AI is a topic that exists already for a very long time in different kind of flavors. Yeah. And when we are talking now about AI, then everybody is talking basically about the latest disruption, so the LLM type of disruption for the last 3 years. What we have done initially, and this is kind of for the first 3 years, we focused a lot on collecting the right amount of data, cleaning up the data, organizing the data. So we have also very deliberately organized our data in a data warehouse model, which was actually a little bit contrarian when we did this because everybody was very hyped about data lakes. But we said, well, we need to have a very organized data warehouse, which actually has benefited us a lot down the road. And we started to use machine learning and deep learning on a significant level since 2017-18. So this is now also 7-8 years ago. Classical kind of recommender, forecasting, suggestion cases, etc. And obviously, since the last 2 or 3 years, that has accelerated significantly, where AI can become really a kind of a core let's say co-pilot, co-agent in most of the business processes that we have in Picnic.
So you already hinted at more modern and more common uses of AI right now. So we're moving into an agentic era. So what's the state of agentic AI at Picnic, top down?
Well, first of all, this is not a top-down topic. So this is a topic that the entire organization has. So we have formed a view and a strategy, both bottom-up and top-down, where actually we encouraged many teams to experiment with AI tools, to share experiences, to try out what works, what doesn't work. And on the one hand, we gave everybody the mandate to really experiment with tools, with only kind of 2 requirements. Number 1 is whatever works, you share with the rest of the organization. The second one, what is not working, you promise also you stop with it. And that is actually, the second one is a little bit a hard thing, where most organizations start stuff but never stop, even if it doesn't work. So that has helped us to quite a bit of let's say, get experience with the different phases of the LLM disruption until the kind of the agents and multi-agent type of systems. One interesting learning what we had there was that we are organized as in country-based teams. So that means we have a Dutch operation, we have a German, and we have a French one. We launched very recently in France, so this is the smallest team. This smallest team is actually most effective in the way of how they are using AI. And the reason for this is that they are actually running a very similar type of scope of operation. So, for instance, category management, price management, or promotion management, with a team that is only maybe 5 or 7 times smaller than our Dutch team is. So that means there was a much higher innovation pressure for that team to also get going with those kind of AI tools. So hence, they have been the first adopters and have been so effective that essentially the rest of the organization is now very much learning from our little small French team that is absolutely cutting edge.
Yeah, so you've used the word mandate and you've used the word encouragement. I'm kind of curious, if you look at many organizations, you see that there are a bunch of people at the forefront, so they pick up whatever's new. And there's also a large group of people at the other end who more conservative. They tend also to be usually the more senior engineers. I'm kind of curious if you also see that. But so what does this encouragement look like? How do you make sure you get the most from a large organization?
So that comes actually in different kind of flavors. So first of all, Picnic as a young organization, we thought, well, everybody is young, hungry, very much driven with innovation. There will not be somebody who is too reluctant of adopting those kind of new tools.
No.
But actually, in reality, what you see, that also in such a young organization, not everybody is immediately jumping on the latest trend, tries out, and is hungry to really understanding what's going on.
No.
So what we have done across the organization is we have actually run AI transformation weeks. And that means at the beginning of the week, we're defining a bit what are the processes that we want to adopt. Then we radically really use all the AI tools that we have evaluated before to adopt it strictly. And then on Friday, we want to have actually as proof points that those processes have been running for 1 or 2 days, completely this kind of in an AI way as we have defined it before.
Yeah.
So that has worked across the organization very well. The next level where we are now in is that some teams are continuing with this way of working and have really a significant step up on quality, on productivity, and et cetera, et cetera. But some teams are converging back to the old way of working. So we are now trying to figure out a bit on how to really transform those teams in a sustainable way that it stays also on this level where we want to see it.
So there is. You started out by saying it's not top down, but the example you gave is where there is a top down element in it. But it seems the way you describe it, it was a sort of modeling behavior.
It is certainly a kind of a top-down initiative that we have started. But actually the signal and the encouragement came from bottom-up, where actually teams were saying, well, this works so well, it is a shame that we only were doing it in that kind of team. Can you not help us that also the rest of the organization is using it? So it goes pretty much hand in hand. And I'm pretty convinced that a pure top-down approach or a pure bottom-up approach cannot work. So these are two extremes. It needs to be always go back and forth between top-down and bottom-up.
And do you have a hypothesis already on why these teams that were reverting back to their sort of their original non-agentic ways? What's happening there? What type of dynamic?
So there are probably kind of 3 reasons why people are. Why somebody is converging to the old behavior. So one thing is, obviously, it's not delivering always the kind of the results.
No.
So hence, if you are a little bit more conservative, and or if you are a bit more experienced, so that means you have seen the old way of working, you're comparing your old way of working, especially all the stuff that has worked so well with the new way of working. And even if it's in 95% of the cases working better, you're picking this 5% where it's not yet working better. You say, well, I told you, and hence you go back with your old way of working. A very good analogy to that is also if you're looking a bit what happens in autonomous driving, then in essence, already autonomous driving is from a technology perspective way better than humans. So there is actually no reason to not allow everybody to drive autonomously. However, there are indeed cases, and these are more in the 0.xx%, where still humans are a little bit better. So that's the reason why not everybody is yet adopting it. So number one is basically the exception that in some cases it's not yet working. The second one is also that it is just much more comfy to continue in your old way of working. So because you're just comfortable, you're used to it. For instance, also the organizational ways of how to review what are success criteria of somebody looking like needs to also evolve quite a bit. So what we learned over time is if we are not from a kind of the people and the success criteria side also evolving, then obviously there's little incentive for everybody to really adopt a new way of working. Yeah. And the third one is also to some sense some afraidness of you're giving up your old way of, let's say, your secure way of working and something new that may deliver or not deliver. So if you put this all together, then you still see is that some people are adopting it, and you need a kind of a critical mass that is really adopting it, and then the rest will also move along. And then we have obviously seen in industry a lot of kind of COO mails that are saying, well, from now on, you need to use this, otherwise you're out. I don't believe in that kind of approach, because you want to have the buy-in from everybody that this is the right next step to go.
Yeah. So, and you already made a step with the approach that you took, but now so I already hear the contours of a plan of getting these other teams on board. Is there anything you need to do to make sure that these teams that are off and really adopt this approach of getting better and better, and you said their quality is also increasing in productivity? Is there? Do you just leave them now? Is this? Do you also need to bound them somehow or?
So the thing is, so first of all, step one is using those tools in a meaningful way, and that teams themselves actually perceive and also realize that they are more productive. What is happening in a world, especially this kind of agentic transformation of organizations, it moves structurally bottlenecks in the organization from one team to the next team. So that means if you look to the bigger complex processes, and that is where now senior leadership is actually required, the bottleneck is moving to the next team or to the next kind of process or the next tool. So hence, what we have started is instead of beside the tracking of productivity and progress on one hand, we have set up a very systematic tracking of bottlenecks. And I'm actually less interested in kind of the classical productivity gains that everybody is now sometimes reporting about.
You don't want more lines of code?
No, lines of code is for sure the wrong measure, but obviously there are measures that are a little bit more suited. But if you want, there's so much debate about how to measure really productivity, especially in engineering organizations. There's only one thing what is clear. If there are less bottlenecks of moving fast, then you will move fast. Or if you can remove bottlenecks, you will for sure move faster tomorrow than today. So hence, our key criteria and that kind of transition is to identify the bottlenecks that teams are observing and remove every day or every week a couple of key bottlenecks such that we observe the next bottlenecks in the coming week. It's simple as that.
I'm curious, what do they look like? What's the unit of measurement for a bottleneck?
Yes. So when you're... So let me start with maybe very simple examples. So if you're using something like Claude, single or multi-agent mode, then obviously the realization or the implementation goes very fast. If you then have a human-in-the-loop type of a review approach, then immediately the bottleneck moves from implementation to review.
Yes.
So then you need to figure out how do you organize your reviews in a way that the kind of increased number of pull requests that are opened can be handled. If you handle that, the review one, then the next bottleneck will be deployment is to a large extent automated on our side, but then the next one is on the specification side. So then the question is a bit, how do you streamline the specification process? And then the next one moves to requirements, and then you move to business opportunities. So I feel, it's pretty clear that there are many bottlenecks that you will hit, and actually it should also be like this. Because every bottleneck is an opportunity to become better. The worst what can happen is if you don't have bottlenecks, because then there's little opportunity to actually be tomorrow better than today.
So do you see patterns there? Do you see specific bottlenecks arising? Is it because some of these things sounded like they were in the future still?
So the clear bottleneck that we are now working as of now, or what clearly now working on, is how to streamline and accelerate the review process. What is pretty clear is that automated review tools are pretty strong on reviewing the code that is actually created itself. So the functional the change that is created. And we have moved our review activities, so especially human ones, to purely review regressions in the context of the change itself. So that already helps us to be faster on the review side. It is certainly not yet fast enough, so we need to make a couple of more steps. One of the interesting things that we see now also there is that the quality of the reviews potentially may decrease. So we have not seen it actually in practical terms, but we see that especially if the quality of the produced code is actually becoming better and better, then as a reviewer, you have also some of the changes. this kind of looks good to me type of judgment, and then you basically just approve it without or rubber stamp it without properly reviewing it. And that is something what we obviously want to avoid. So there we are still figuring out how to do this properly. We know that this is a problem that the friends from Alphabet and Meta and everybody is somehow battling with that. So we are pretty closely also in interactions and communicating with the rest of the industry to figure out how everybody should handle it.
And zooming out, because we've been really zooming in on this particular review process, how do you see it? You already mentioned, I see productivity and quality going up. You explained, well, productivity for me is the inverse of bottlenecks. How does it go for quality? Is that something that you notice in incidents or in, I don't know what your variables are for that?
So we are measuring very structurally the number of incidents, the incident hours, MTTR, etc., etc. We have not seen big changes there. To be honest, we are also at a relatively early stage to roll it out for the mission critical teams, where actually incident hours and incident costs would make a big difference. But this is something we are very closely monitoring and also trying to figure out what are the right kind of safeguards. Yeah. One thing what we already see from a skill set and a capability perspective in tech is that while the classical implementation engineering is probably a skill set that you need less from in the kind of future tech teams, the non-functional properties, so quality-related aspects, but also security, resilience, etc., that type of engineering will become even more important going forward. Yeah. So I had a very nice discussion with the CISO group a couple of days ago, where everybody was looking a bit into how should an organization in 2027 or 2030 look like if you say, let's say, security versus other functions. So currently the benchmark is that you have around 5 to 10% of the entire tech budget goes in security. Sometimes obviously more, but if it's a kind of a non-regulated industry, then 5 to 10% is something what people take as a little bit kind of a benchmark. That can easily go to 20-25% going forward. In regulated industries, you can imagine scenarios where you are closer to 50%.
Yeah.
Especially if Mythos gets released, this will certainly become a very interesting time.
Do you already see changes where a larger majority of the code is being written that you see when it comes to resiliency? You gave us an example, but also security vulnerabilities, and I'm talking about static code scanning, not the deployment level, but also maintainability, for example, or metrics regarding the architecture quality. I don't know really what you do collect. Do you collect some of these, and do you see changes at scale when you look at your landscape?
We are collecting metrics in a very, very systematic way across our tech stack. We have the tricky thing is since if you're looking a bit to the change rate of the code itself, then obviously if you're looking to, let's say, month over month, a large part of the code base is not changed or has only very small changes. Yes. So the tricky thing with that kind of metrics is, even if there would be a significant change, it would be really a very gradual change across the entire code base.
You should only look at the delta, right? Especially your larger systems don't move much, although security might retroactively become a problem in existing code.
Security is obviously system-wide property. So that is something we have for now. What we are looking very carefully in is to make sure that, for instance, the code changes and architectural quality reviews, that we are still even more stepping up those kind of reviews instead of getting lighter on it going forward. What we have seen is that obviously the way how code is written by any of those kind of coding tools is a little bit more bulky / expressive. So you want to see it a bit more compact. The debate that we have now internally is how big is the problem if it's written in a little bit more expressive a way? Is that really a big problem going forward or not? There's even a discussion in the industry that says going forward from a maintainability perspective with respect to this kind of AI tools, it's better if you're not changing too much of the outcome of those tools because they are trained on those kind of patterns. So we are figuring a little bit out also how to make our code base ready for those kind of AI tools.
Yeah. I think that's true. So if you're talking about smaller chunks of code on the unit level or maybe even a small component level, then it's probably true that another LLM is really good at understanding what an LLM output. But we also know at a larger scale, the quality is relatively low. It's slightly below market average, which is not necessarily great market average. So at large scale, I don't think LLMs are so great at understanding systems. We recently published an article about this where we compared code that is not changed at all by humans to code that is heavily written by agents, but with firm guardrails in place to make it a little bit more old-fashioned, if you would call it, the old-fashioned way of maintainability. You do get better systems.
I'm absolutely not surprised. Maybe LLMs are trained on very large, on many kind of code bases.
Should be market average by definition.
So more or less already part of the way of the process of how they are trained and created, you will get by definition already just the average out. What you could do, obviously, is that if you identify, okay, this is, let's say, the better set of code bases and you want to only train on this kind of subset, then you could obviously try that. The current way of training those models requires so much data input that actually the trade-off between having too little kind of code bases and then having too much randomness of the outcome versus taking a larger code base, but hence the average quality that you get out is more biased towards taking a larger code base or set of code bases and taking a more average outcome. So that is pretty clear. But you can also look from the other angle, because that means if those models are by default all creating an average outcome, then for you as an engineer who can actually produce or help such a system to be significantly beyond the average, there's some real value for you.
Yes.
So let's say on the one hand, if you're only able to do the average, then that will become difficult for you in the new age of software engineering. But if you are able to actually produce better code, then obviously fantastic times. It has never been better than
Although in your example now, the engineer would be the bottleneck, right? So you would need something in there that does that automatically.
Human in any process, in any process where humans are involved, humans should be the bottleneck, and there's no problem with this at all.
No, not necessarily. No.
That is so because this is obviously something. There are kind of human limitations to how far you can go on optimizing that, but there's no problem at all with this kind of setup.
So recently you were a judge at a hackathon at Open Claw. You got to see a lot of work being done there. Were there any patterns that you saw? Anything that really stuck out in your role as a judge there?
So first of all, this was a hackathon that we did on a weekend, basically a one-day hackathon for a few hours, a couple of topics. We as Picnic and a few others suggested some ideas, and it is impressive on how far the participants could go in just a couple of hours. So that is very, very impressive. I think what you can see, and this, is that the shift of what to produce in a hackathon, and the software industry will obviously see this also later, is the classical software engineer. So you have a very well-specified problem, and then you come up with a well-crafted solution, is certainly no longer the bottleneck in the process of designing software products. No. So it still needs to happen, but the real differentiator for a hackathon is coming up with a creative solution, or coming up with, first of all, maybe with a revised creative problem that you tackle, and then basically building that kind of hackathon solution. And that means in the industry, you have obviously in some organizations, large organizations, you have product engineers and software engineers. And this kind of separation between product and software engineers has been always a little bit fuzzy. But as a flavor, because it's a kind of a spectrum, as a flavor, probably most of the software engineers becoming more product engineers going forward. And the role of a product owner will be merged into a software engineer. Obviously, there are still some kind of product owner tasks that the software engineer will not pick up. But a significant part of the product ownership will certainly move into the software engineering role going forward. And this is kind of the new generation, or the new era of full stack software engineering.
One other thing that you said when you were speaking at the Signal conference, you were talking about SODA, software data, where you said it's about designing data models before you actually design the software. What happened to that paradigm in the past year? Are you still standing behind that, or is that changed now?
So the idea behind this is the following. So obviously there are all kind of architectural patterns that people have developed. And then if you look to classical architectural patterns, then usually you capture business functionality with specific patterns. And then you try to look a bit into what is the data and the control flow, etc. What we have realized is if you want to be really data first and data centric as an organization, then your thinking should start more from a data side. So what is the core data models that you need, and then design basically the business functionality in the services around it, instead of starting with the business functionalities and then organizing data around your business functionalities. So that kind of thinking has helped us also quite a bit in moving more and more towards a kind of a software architecture where every kind of new functionality that we implement, we are also looking into how can, for instance, which role can machine learning and AI have going forward. But actually the underlying question that we are asking is something even simpler. We are looking into if you deploy the service, how can it perform tomorrow better than today without changing any line of code? And the way how you can achieve that is if you have some form of machine learning model in in that kind of service, then, and we have a nightly training process, then obviously the nightly training based on the new operation data from the day trains with more data, hence the performance of the machine learning model improves. You don't need to deploy a new model, but this is basically just a retrained and improved machine learning model. So the overall system performance improves the next day, on the day afterwards again, just because we have trained the model with better data. And this kind of architectural pattern where you say, okay, you have for everything what you have rule-based hard-coded, you use software. Everything what is data-driven, machine learning-based, you have basically a machine learning module, and both together are yin and yang type of sides of the same coin. That is kind of the architecture that we follow. And
you already had that in place? Is that something that changed, or that is that still the approach that you're currently using?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have organized a large part of the tech stack since day one, like that. What is changing a bit now is that we have more and more services that are depending on the same kind of data. So in essence, in the same way as in the past, people have built on platforms to have shared functionality used across multiple services that are built on top of a platform. You can think that kind of platform way of working and thinking. You can apply actually also for data. Where you have data that in a platform way is organized and reused across different kind of services.
It is a very interesting approach. I'm very curious, just looking at you a little bit. I guess that your day-to-day, or at least what you focus on, has changed a lot in the past, at least in the past 5 years, but let's focus on the last year. Again, let's take the Signal conference as an anchor point. What things changed with this agentic central move that your organization has been making?
So in a start/scale up, obviously a lot of stuff is changing. And essentially every 6, 9, 12 months, we are as an organization, but also the entire tech organization, including myself, needs to reinvent themselves. So that is part of our DNA. What we have seen in concrete terms, especially over the last year, is that with more and more of agentic way of working, with AI-supported kind of engineering tools, that our way of how to organize teams, how to organize initiatives, how to structure ourselves is changing in a significant way. So when we are now designing and when we are now drawing an org chart, then basically what we do is we have a few human developers that working on a specific initiative, but then there are also agents. And together, agents plus humans form this organizational unit.
You have actual org charts where agents are some of the nodes.
That is the way how we think about organization. Because essentially this is what our agents are doing. Agents are fulfilling a specific task in the organization or in his team. And the way when we are talking about or when we are looking into organizing a specific initiative or a team, then the question is a bit what should be human driven, what is human collaborated with agents, and what is agent only driven. And the interesting thing, if you use such an organizational model, then the only thing what you do over time is you're asking yourself, where do you draw the line between what is purely human-driven and what is maybe human plus agent or agent alone-driven?
Yeah.
Because that changes over time.
Yeah.
And what you see is that that is obviously moving a little bit towards, or maybe a bit more, towards agentic or agent-based work.
Yeah.
But you see, this is also sometimes you go a bit too far and then you go back again.
What are the main drivers of that change? Is that specific use cases that work for your organization or that particular part of the org chart, or just general agents getting better?
And so the reason why we're moving those kind of lines, as I said, obviously the capabilities of agents are becoming better. This is
clear.
one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, and this goes hand in hand, also our understanding and our way of working with agents becomes better.
Yeah.
So just agent becoming more powerful is not enough to change this kind of line between, or the drawing line between what humans are doing or what agents are doing.
Yeah. We spent quite some time. What takeaway should somebody listening to our conversation have, do you think? What would be key points that you find important to repeat?
So we covered quite a few topics.
Yes,
This is obviously a very exciting time for everybody to be in tech. So first, let's say point one, whoever feels is not in tech is essentially in tech. Also, you should realize that while we are obviously all working with AI tools, that means we are all not only kind of using AI, but we're also building AI to some extent because we are also giving back data. So this is one. The second one is while these are obviously all kind of tools that we're now exploring, and some are a bit further, some less, I think it is very important that everybody also rethinks a bit their processes. I think the worst what can happen for us as an industry is that you're starting to automate processes that shouldn't exist at all. So that is more the organization design principle. So, and the third one is nobody should be afraid of using those kind of tools. So there's this nice phrasing, it's not from me, but people are not replaced by agents, but or by AI tools, but people are replaced by people that use AI tools. Something that has been iterated obviously many times. Yeah. But this is actually really, really true. Yeah. And there's maybe kind of a second element to this. If you're using in a meaningful way AI tools, you will not be replaced. You're actually rocking whatever you are doing. Yeah. So just don't be afraid and just go all in.
Yes.
Just do it.
Yes, I like that last one a lot. I'm going to repeat that. Thanks a lot. It was an education. I had fun. This was very interesting. Thank you for watching. You can look at the other episodes in the channels that we have available, and we'll be again with you next month.